plan. I've had a few people ask me, given my last video and other things that I've put out on my website, Stillness in the Storm, do you really think things are going according to plan? Don't you think that the alliance, that the positive military, that the white hats have dropped the ball? Clearly, they didn't want Trump not in the White House. Clearly, they didn't want Biden to be in the White House and to have all this craziness happen. Well, frankly, I don't actually believe that. And before we get into why and why I think understanding this transcends the whole concept of the positive military insider that everybody knows about that I have to be careful about, I want to ask you to please go to stillnessinthestorm.com/donate. That's stillnessinthestorm.com/donate. Help support work like this and my website, Stillness in the Storm, where we're covering all sorts of news, information, and trying to give you the positive news that can help inspire and educate you. Big tech and the deep state are trying to stop outlets like mine. We've been completely delisted, and if it wasn't for your support, we couldn't do what we're doing. Another way to support us is if you go to stillnessinthestorm.com/EMF Harmonized or click on the partners link, you're going to see an outlet called EMF Harmonized, where you can get special technology to help protect you from electromagnetic radiation. It's been tested, it's scientifically validated, it's not just some mumbo jumbo product, it really does work. Before we can get into this idea of whether or not the plan is or is not successful, we have to first address the elephant in the living room, which is what is the plan and what are we talking about? Now, a lot of haters out there like to say that the very fact that Biden got into the White House and Trump didn't win is proof that the plan was all BS. Well, the presupposition behind all that is that they think they know what the plan is, and these plans are incredibly complicated. Praying medic Dave Hayes, he had a wonderful interview with Dave from X22 Report, which I posted on Stillness in the Storm Rumble, where they discussed the idea of an O plan. An O plan is a specific type of military plan that is vast in complication. It's like a D-Day level plan. If you know anything about the military operation that was specifically designed to land on the beaches of Normandy and stop the Nazis, this is not something they hashed out within a couple of weeks. This took years of planning to figure out every single tiny detail, because when they wanted to push this thing, they wanted it to be extremely successful. And it was successful. Now, were there some things that maybe didn't go exactly according to plan? No doubt. Because when you're making a good plan, turns out the plan isn't this perfect, flawlessly crafted pathway forward where there's literally no deviancy. No, it's not a trunk, it's a tree. There's many branches, there's many possibilities as to what you can or cannot do and what you can anticipate. And what any good chess player does, and this is why chess is a really good analogy, you're not trying to figure out one path to success, you're trying to figure out all of the paths to success. And that way you're anticipating the move that your opponent makes, and you're formulating a counter move and a contingency plan associated with that. So that's what an O plan is in substance. The group that we affectionately call the Alliance, I believe, is that level of coordination and planning. I suspect that this plan was developed far before Trump even attempted to run for office. I believe that this thing was in the works probably for decades, and they were waiting for the right time and planning each and every step. So if you can imagine, storming the beaches of Normandy and D-Day was a massive operation, right? Well, think something 10 times bigger. Think something 100 times bigger. Think something that was so massive and complex that it had to deal with an enemy that was not clearly known to the Alliance forces, an enemy that is entangled into almost every aspect of society that you can imagine, an enemy that has thoroughly indoctrinated the people into conscripting to its agenda, and an enemy that has seemingly limited amount of resources. So one of the biggest issues with any successful military operation is how you're going to deal with the confidence problem. Are the people going to participate in the overthrow of what you believe to be a bad guy? And so it has to deal with the public opinion issue. How are you going to convince the people? The challenge of dealing with the enemy that we know we're facing here, the deep state, is that for most people, they don't think that they're the enemy. Most people think these are the good guys and Trump was the enemy. The conservatives are the enemy, the Christians are the enemy, whatever label that seems to espouse these, what we might call core patriotic values. So what that does is it presents a huge, huge problem, but also one that can most definitely be solved. We have to create positive propaganda. We have to create a series of events that allow the people to identify who the enemy is by their own merits and means. And I think that's exactly what's happening right now. I've spoken to several people over the past few weeks, ever since the 20th, who are completely disillusioned, who feel like everything has gone to hell in a handbasket, that maybe Trump and the alliance completely lost their edge and they must have just given up. But no, I don't think so, because in my opinion, although I did think that it was possible something might happen on the 20th, I knew at that time that probably something wasn't going to happen because there was this confidence problem. Most people didn't really have a clear-cut understanding of who the bad actors were. Yes, the people who are hip and aware of the operation didn't know, they knew that there was an enemy out there, but that's only like maybe 60, 70, 80 million people who really know about that. Maybe I'm being conservative with my estimate, but it's not the large swath of the human population. And this has to be a global operation. This is one thing that our friend was constantly saying, is that this operation was not just going to be in the US, it was going to be global. I think it's actually very successful. And I think what we're seeing now is the buildup of the true patriotic spirit. Think about what happened at the Boston Tea Party, and think about what happened to all the draconian measures that were instituted after the colonists decided to rebel against the colonies. If you look at that history back at the time, they made an attempt to try to speak to King George and get their grievances aired. And King George basically said, screw you. And then they used non-compliance and other means to try to force their position and show King George, hey, listen, we got more control than you think. But King George kept pushing harder and harder and harder on them. And the harder he pushed, the more patriots he created. That is what's happening right here and now. The harder Joe Biden pushes, the more the deep state comes out and pushes their agenda, the more patriots they create. I saw 2 different podcasts over the past 2 weeks that were talking about thousands of congregations and people, churches all over the country, who were way more active now and saying, listen, guys, the communist agenda is here, the Antichrist is here, the dark forces are here, the invisible enemy is here. They're openly pushing their agenda. They're pushing sex onto children through this woke sexual education when they're teaching like 1st, 2nd, and 3rd and 4th graders about sex toys. They're destroying decent human values with respect to a man and a woman being able to have separate bathrooms. They're destroying the ability for women to actually compete in sports. Transgender women, which is basically men, to come in and pollute that competitive environment and destroy the ability for women to actually prove themselves in a sporting arena. And all of these things and many more, the Great Reset agenda, the Green New Deal agenda, the corruption that's happening, the corruption that's happening with the impeachment that's going on right now, all of this, every time a new lie comes out, every time a new draconian measure comes out, every time Biden issues another dozen executive orders, a lot of regular people say, whoa, wait a minute, what is happening here? So I think the plan is actually proceeding very well. The fact that so many politicians were willing to completely destroy the Constitution and say that a civilian can be impeached should speak volumes. I'm going to refer you back to my video entitled, Is This the Trump Card? Because these people have openly breached trust. And this is helping to wake up a lot of people. I want to take also a more spiritual perspective with this. I want everybody to realize that the forces of goodness are on our side. You know, we often say in battles that God is on our side. No, God is on our side. No, God is on our side. But why would God be on anyone's side? Well, if we take a moment to understand how we can discern what God's will is, then you have to think about the law. God's will is eternal, it's consistent, and it's universally applicable. So those are 3 qualities that we can look at to see what God's will is. God created law. God is the lawgiver, right? So we have natural laws, we have divine laws, we have the laws of nature, we have these principles that are eternally consistent, that are consistent everywhere. They're universally applicable to all things. It's not that gravity works here for me and over in your neck of the world, it's totally different. No, it's still the principle of gravity. The principle of electromagnetism works everywhere. So understanding that as a concept, as a cipher to try to figure out what is God's will in relation to human affairs, you can think about it like this. God gave humans a law system to govern their behavior, and that's morality. That is the system of rights. The founding fathers discovered this. They were naturalists and theists who believed, and rightly so, that our rights come from a creator. And therefore, anyone who is seeking to honor the rights of another and to defend themselves and other people against a tyrant who seeks to manipulate, rape, and pillage the other people's rights, then the person who's acting in righteousness, meaning defending the rights of others, that person has God on their side. So I'm not making this like kind of flippant argument that, oh, you know, God's on our side. No, what I'm saying definitively, unquestionably, with reason and logic, we can conclusively say that God is on the side of those who are willing to stand up for truth, freedom, and justice, and are willing to fight against tyrants, liars, and rapists, basically, people who are raping and pillaging, the pirates of the world. So I actually think this is a time to be very hopeful. For all those people who said that the plan is just meant to pacify us, in my honest opinion, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't actually know what the plan is. And nobody really knows what the plan is because the plan is vastly complicated. But if you ask yourself honestly, what has happened over the past 4 years, then hardly have people been pacified. As a matter of fact, millions of hearts and minds have been awakened, and people are way more active than they ever were. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to get pitchforks. So the measure of success is not for everybody to go buy a gun and buy a rifle and we're going to storm the Capitol. No. What we need to do is we need to figure out how we're going to keep our new freedom once we have it. This is what the founding fathers did, which is really revolutionary because through most times in history, it's not like that's the first time a tyrant has been overthrown. The challenge that any freedom-centric people has to deal with is what are you going to do with the freedom that you have afterwards? How are you going to honor each other's rights? How are you going to prevent the hero of one age from becoming a tyrant in the next age? That's what all these Greek legends and Greek history shows us, and Roman history shows us, and all this history shows us throughout the ages, is that we have to have a system where the rule of law, where the people are educated and they know what the rule of law is, they know how to manage their affairs, and they know the laws of morality. Now, this isn't some hazy thing where there's no way to figure it out. It's very simple. If we take the time now to understand how to be our brother's keeper, if we take the time now to form honest, valid methods of trade and economy so we can eliminate usury, we can eliminate the manipulation and coercion of our fellows into debt slavery systems, if we can work together in a very kind of like Star Trek age type society where we all work for the betterment of mankind and the pursuit of wealth alone is not the only means of us motivating ourselves, then we're going to create a world where the freedom doesn't just last for a couple hundred years, it lasts for a couple thousand years, for potentially as long as we can conceive of. That's the dream that we have the ability to manufacture right now. And we can take the time now to do it. So if you're asking yourself, what should I do? Be prudent, prepare, you know, get food, get water, learn how to fire a gun, learn how to do all these things. But what we really should be doing is learning how to interact and be diplomatic with each other so we can form unity and we can stand together and form good communities that can weather the storm so that we can discuss these issues with our fellows. So we learn how the issues of debate and dialectic and rhetoric. We learn diplomacy so that we can talk with our fellows and form alliances and coalitions. And we can form a body politic that can work together and a truly sustainable and free capitalistic system where greed and manipulation that relies on the ignorance of the people doesn't exist because we're highly educated. Now, there is a ton of information out there. This is something that I discovered about 7 years ago, this body of information I'm talking about. I hinted about it in my last video about law. It's the laws of commerce, the laws of contracts, and the laws of communication. If we take the time to learn about these things now, we can create an age of prosperity that completely eclipses what we've seen over the past few hundred years. And we have it within our grasp. So don't worry about like storming the Capitol or lynch anybody. I'm not saying we should do nothing. We should still be prudent. We should form alliances, but we need to form trust. We need to learn how to trust each other. And with that foundation of trust, we can create a valid militia and military force. We can create a beneficial economy. We can create a law system and a justice system so that everybody's rights are protected and nobody's coming under the oppression of some tyrannical government, because that's what's essential. Even if we have the freedom tomorrow, if we don't learn these things as a people, then how can we really trust another elected official, another person who says, oh, don't worry, guys, you don't have to learn those things. I've got it all figured out for you. I'm going to do what's best. No. I happen to believe as a Christian who somebody studies spiritual teachings and laws and what I would call real political science and civics. The greatest teachers throughout history have been talking to us about these things for a long time. If we really love each other, if we learn the truth, if we have justice be the guide of our actions and our behavior, then there's nothing we can't solve. So if you haven't done so already, go to stillnessinthestorm/donate. That's stillnessinthestorm/donate. We have a lot of really good things happening. If you like seeing videos like this, please show your support, even for as little as the cost of a cup of coffee or a meal. You can really help support this work because I've got a lot of awesome things I want to do, but I can't do it if I don't have support. So thank you so much. Much love. Justin out.